When beginning your journey into ESO's PvP, one thing you'll learn pretty quickly is that your build is only half the battle. There's plenty of skill, but more importantly, strategy that goes into PvP and turning that build into a cohesive playstyle. I've covered my PvP healer build on the channel before, but I haven't really talked a whole lot about what else goes into PvP healing. So, my name's Doc, your host for all things healing, and I'm going to give you my top 5 tips for being a great healer in ESO PvP that don't involve your build. Let's get into this. So, tip number 1, your resources are your life. One of the most important aspects of PvP in general, but especially PvP healing, is being able to properly manage your resources. In a PvE setting, very rarely do I run out of stamina or magicka. In PvP, however, running out of these resources can be a very common reason that you or your team may be going down more often than you'd like. You need magicka to be able to heal and defend you and your teammates, and you need stamina to protect yourself and escape an unwinnable fight. So, how do we help minimize our resource loss? For magicka, don't be afraid to throw out some heavy attacks when you're not being pressured. There are plenty of players who will just sit at a distance and poke at you, either because they're waiting for their team to come back, or they're just not very confident as a PvPer. Those guys are perfect for restoring your resources, because those people are likely not putting a whole lot of pressure on you. Another thing you can do for your magicka is being mindful of how much you're spamming certain abilities. Yes, you're going to need to throw out a lot of burst heals in PvP, but don't use so many that you end up completely running out of magicka. When it comes to stamina, try to learn when you should use stamina versus when you can tank the hits, or just not sprint. This is just more of an experience thing that will come to you in time, but it's an important part of being a healer. I'm sure it goes without saying, but at some point during a fight, someone on the enemy team will go, "Wait, no one's dying. I need to take out the healer," and the focus will be placed on you. They're likely going to hit you with stuns, charms, ultimates, and much more. Blocking a Dawnbreaker or dodging out of a rush of agony can be the difference between life or death, and is worth your stamina. Trying to dodge roll away from a single heavy attack or break free when literally no one is attacking you at all only serves to drain your precious stamina. You can also restore your stamina with a heavy attack if you're using a sword and board, but they're not quite as easy to pull off since you have to be within melee distance and you can't do other things like heal yourself during that time. My biggest recommendation, though, is simply to just bring some Tri-Restoration Potions. Since they restore health, magicka, and stamina at the same time, these boys can keep you, and by proxy, your team, in the fight a lot longer. Tip number 2, use cover and avoid line of sight. In shooter games, it's a natural thought to use cover to your advantage, especially as a support. In an MMO, such as ESO, however, a lot of people aren't really thinking about using things like cover or high ground because of things like smart targeting, AoEs, or the pretty slow TTK. However, I want to encourage you, as a healer, to take a more proactive role in finding cover and finding high ground. For your average PvPer, taking cover just means you can't do anything because you can't attack the enemy and they can't attack you. For healers, though, since our primary focus is on our team, not our enemy, placing yourself in a position where you can't be hit by enemies, but you can still heal and support your team, can make a massive difference in a fight. If enemies aren't able to pressure you, you'll have a much easier time doing things like managing your resources, keeping skills up, and looking out for any attacks that you may need to anticipate. It's not just about avoiding pressure either, because a lot of abilities, especially ultimates, rely on line of sight. It's not as easy to pull off, but when enemies do begin to realize where you are and apply pressure, you can try to use the environment and abuse line of sight to bait out ultimates or something like Rush of Agony. I can't promise that it will always work, but when you are able to pull it off, that just means one less thing that could have hurt your teammates. Essentially, all of this is to say that healers have a unique ability to position themselves where they might be able to do a lot of good without having to put themselves in harm's way. Tip number 3, keep your buffs up. You know what's just as good as healing? Defensive buffs. Keeping a high uptime on major and minor buffs like Resolve, Protection, Fortitude, Vitality, etc. will help keep incoming damage lower, which, in turn, will help you keep your team healed. Now, of course, most PvPers worth their salt will find ways of maintaining a lot of their own offensive and defensive buffs. However, if you follow the PvP build video I have on my channel, or one of the many other excellent builds from ESO content creators out there, you'll be able to help a lot of players with any gaps that they may have in their own builds, especially on the defensive side of things. As a healer in PvP, our job is pretty much solely to focus on making sure our teammates and ourselves are staying alive, which is why we typically prioritize defensive buffs over offensive ones. If you do have room in your build for some offensive buffs, great, awesome, but I personally always recommend never to sacrifice defense for offense when it comes to PvP healing. All of that to say that keeping a high uptime on your buffs, especially defensive ones, are a great way of making sure you and your teammates are staying healthy and not floor parsing. Tip number 4, ultimate timing is key. In PvP, especially for healers, your ultimate is your lifeline. Whether you're using Soul Siphon, Barrier, Rite of Passage, or whatever else you're using, your ultimate can very easily turn a losing fight into one that heavily favors your side. Now, I personally use Soul Siphon like 95% of the time, so that's what I'll be basing my timing off of, but different ults may be used more proactively or reactively and in certain situations and all sorts of other things. Your preferred ult likely has its own unique thing that you'll just have to get used to, and you will in time. So what are some ways we can learn to time our ultimates? Well, in the case of using your ult proactively, the idea is to anticipate high amounts of incoming damage and use your ult before that damage begins to become an issue. You can usually see signs that someone is about to cast their ult, like, for example, someone with Colo will probably hit you with 16 stuns and a Rush of Agony pull before casting it. Obviously, it isn't always that easy to tell, especially in the heat of combat, but through experience, you'll start to notice when people like to pop their ultimates. In the case of using your ult reactively, you'll want to wait until a lot of that damage has already gone out, luring the enemy into a false confidence, and then you negate nearly all of that damage with a single button, giving your team the advantage in the fight. This can also be difficult to pull off, especially early in a fight where you're unsure of what sorts of builds the enemy team has. Both of these require a good amount of game sense and reaction time, but again, with enough practice and time in PvP, you will absolutely get there. And tip number 5, you can't save everyone. This is definitely the most important tip on this list, and it extends beyond just the simple idea of sometimes your teammates are going to die. It also means sometimes your team will lose, even if you heal your butt off. It means that there are times where you're going to have to retreat from a fight, and not everyone may follow you and live to tell the tale. It especially means that sometimes you yourself will be overwhelmed and killed. All of these things are okay. I know I haven't been streaming a whole lot lately, but if you've encountered me in-game, you know that I'm good, but I'm not a miracle worker. Sometimes I go down, sometimes I lose games, I don't always play as well as I know I could have, and there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody plays like that. What is important is doing the best you can with what you have and giving it your best shot. Your best doesn't have to look exactly the same from game to game. You're going to have games where you pop off and have like 2 deaths on the whole team, and people are going to message you thanking you for healing the team. You're also going to have games that are very much not that. My thing has always been and always will be that if you lose a game or your team loses a fight, and you look back on it and you can honestly say that you played well despite the loss, then that's still a win in my book. Everyone watching this video, including myself, will continue to learn and improve, whether that be their build, their buff up times, their timing, or anything else. Don't dwell on a lost game or on a team that didn't work well. Instead, focus on improving your own gameplay, and remember that even the best healers in ESO still lose people sometimes. And that was my top 5 tips for healing in ESO PvP. Of course, there's always more advice that I could share, and maybe I will another time. Also, remember that I pride myself on being a very good healer, but I'm not perfect, so feel free not to listen to me if you think I'm full of baloney. Don't forget to check out the link in the description so you can follow me on stuff and join my Discord server. Before we sign off, I also want to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters Tyler Scott, Dylan Stewart, and Sharni Lee, as well as my YouTube members King Gingy, Durgy, insert username Eric from Ohio, Timeburn, and Malcolm Ewing. Thank you guys for your continued support, and I appreciate y'all. I think all I've got left to say is that I've been Doc. Take care of yourselves, be good to others, make sure to be kind to your teammates, and I will catch y'all in the next one.